I think because of your job, you hear about Einstein a lot, right? Because you deal with kids. Sometimes they're gifted in terms of intelligence. And so the topic of Einstein comes up every now and then.
In conversations about IQ and achievement and neurological diversity broadly defined, Einstein comes up a lot.
Yeah. Let me get a couple of memes. Here we go. So it is dumb people think Einstein was bad at math. Normal people think Einstein was good at math. But the truth is that Einstein was bad at math. Okay. So this thing is what people think.
Yeah.
And so what I mean by that is this. The thing you just saw is this. Normies think that the truth is that Einstein is bad at math, and normies think it's good at math. Right?
Yeah, okay.
But actually, the truth is that Einstein was actually good at math, in fact. And normies think that he's bad at math.
Right.
And I think maybe the below probably think he's good at math because they're like, oh yeah, Einstein was a smart guy, right? So he's probably good at math. What do we mean by that? He was gifted. He did calculus at 14, 13, something like that. Like he mastered calculus.
Yeah.
The rumor apparently started because he applied to university early.
Way early, at like 16.
And he actually like super ace physics and math, but he failed something else.
Yes.
And so that's why he didn't get into the university early. But he did get into university like later, like I guess at the normal time.
Right.
And so he's not bad at math. It's not like he failed math. He failed something.
Right.
I don't know what it was. Maybe English, maybe history, who knows? He failed something, but he wasn't expected to pass that anyway. And he was good at math. So somehow that story got distorted to he's bad at math.
Yeah. I get told all the time that he was dyslexic.
Okay.
That he was bad at math, that he was bad at school in general.
So, for the record, he wasn't bad at math. He was very good at math.
Right.
Also, he was a fanboy of Ernst Mach. I don't know how to pronounce the name. That's another scientist. And we know this because Einstein wrote founding letters to Mach.
Seems reasonable.
Mach's philosophy was that experience is primary above everything else, to the point where he argued that atomic theory was bad science because you can't directly experience atoms. I think he looked upon it the same way that modern scientists today, this is my made up analogy, I don't know if this is true, but the way I'm understanding it is in Aristotle, this is pre-Isaac Newton, Aristotle was trying to understand motions of objects. And I think he was the guy who was like, the reason a rock rolls down a hill is because rock is made of earth and earth wants to return to the earth. So it wants to move downwards. Yeah. And so modern scientists are like, that's dumb. It's not that it gives the wrong prediction because rocks do indeed roll down earth. But this idea of a rock wants something, you don't need that. Eliminate that from your mental model. It's going to distract you. That's how modern scientists today view Aristotelian theories of motion. And I'm saying that's how Mach, I think, viewed atomic theory. Forget atoms. You can't directly experience atoms. It's a distraction. Focus on what's measurable and what you can sense, what your senses tell you. And
so there was a big movement, right? Like that's
positivism,
sort of the
I think
idea
it's called.
Behavioral positivism, yeah.
Yeah. So Mach was, if you go on the Wikipedia page for positivism, Mach's name will show up there.
Makes sense.
So Mach's influence on Einstein was very clear in the way that Einstein wrote his paper on special relativity. For example, he talks about a thought experiment where a train leaves a train station at exactly 6 p.m. You know, sounds like a classic physics problem. But in the paper, he spends time clarifying what does that mean? What does it mean for a train station to leave at 6 p.m.? And the way he says it, what that means is that when the photons arrive in my eye, indicating that the train is starting to leave the station, the photons corresponding to the watch hitting the 6 o'clock position hits my eye at the same time. So that's what it means for a train to leave at 6 p.m. Well, so he's talking about senses, basically. He's taking that Machian view. And arguably, this mental framework was necessary for special relativity because it's in contrast with the Newtonian mental model where space and time exists in an absolute sense, right? Like it's this background object. Space and time are real and particles are moving through them. Isaac says, no, forget that. Don't think of space and time as real. Instead, think what measurements do you make? What do you see? And that's where you have this thing about people disagree on what events are simultaneous. And if you're moving at certain speeds, people disagree on the length of things, of the durations of things, and so on.
Yeah.
So the Machian point of view really helped, I think, was a core causation of Einstein figuring out special relativity.
I have heard it described that his intense level of describing sensorially what was happening was essential to his theory. But I've never heard someone say it as clearly as you do of, oh, it was about the Machian view, that sort of thing.
Right.
So,
Okay, so Einstein developed special relativity. That's a breakthrough, right? It's genius. There's this other guy called Minkowski. He's a mathematician building upon the work of Einstein. So Minkowski did not come up with special relativity, but what he did figure out is that if you assume that space-time is four-dimensional and then you make some other axioms, which I myself don't understand, so I won't try to explain, special relativity just pops out. Modern scientists, like the year 2000 beyond, they would see this as evidence that special relativity is true. The fact that it's mathematically beautiful. You just assume that space-time is a certain way, and then special relativity is going to be what happens. So a scientist hearing that today would say, oh, that means special relativity really is true, right? Not only do we have experimental confirmation, but it just makes sense. Like, it's just the natural way of things to be.
Yeah.
However, at the time, Einstein's reaction to Minkowski's work was negative. He called it, should I even try to pronounce it German? Überflüssige Gelehrsamkeit. Superfluous learning. He was like, you're being big brain for no reason, basically. Because I guess he's still in that Machian mood.
Right.
Anyway, after his success with special relativity, Einstein moved on to try to solve general relativity, which is basically relativity plus gravity, like explain gravity under this theory.
Okay.
So the first attempt that Einstein did, at the time he would have called it like, here's general relativity. I figured that, right? But the thing is, his first attempt ended up being wrong. So retroactively, like nowadays, what we call it is the Entwerf theory, to distinguish it from the real general relativity that he comes up with later on. Spoilers.
Okay.
But so he comes up with this, Entwerf theory, and it showed some promises, but it didn't quite get the correct prediction for the motions of Mercury. And incidentally, it was very ugly. The equations were terrible. In contrast to E equals mc squared, which is like a nice simple equation.
Right.
It was a very big, ugly equation, and it didn't even give the right answers. But at the time, it was the best attempt they had at explaining general relativity, of unifying gravity and special relativity, basically.
Okay.
So Einstein was going around presenting the paper and ideas in lectures, conferences, things like that.
Okay.
And lots of people were excited about it because, again, it was the best theory they had so far. And in particular, there's one person. So lots of people were excited about it, but the story, I'm going to focus on one person now for narrative reasons. There's one guy called David Hilbert. He's a mathematician.
Okay.
Einstein was giving presentations in lots of places. One of the places he wanted to give the presentation to was called Göttingen. I'm, again, not sure about the pronunciation. Some German city. And that's where Hilbert lived. So Hilbert was like, hey, Einstein, why don't you come over to my place? You can just crash at my place, and then you can give the presentation. Einstein was like, sure. So Einstein slept over at Hilbert's place. And so we assume, like academic historians, they talked about general relativity when he slept over because Hilbert was excited about the topic. So it just seemed natural that they probably talked about it. And then Einstein gives his lecture and then he goes back home. This is the olden days, so there's no instant messaging. People had to write letters to communicate with each other. And they had to write letters and mail them in the post office to the scientific institutes to submit them. And there's no like next day shipping guaranteed. You mail it and you don't necessarily know when your letter's going to arrive. It could be weeks later or whatever, depending on the post office.
Yep.
So in early December, Einstein heard a rumor that Hilbert was going to make a major breakthrough in figuring out general relativity. And in response to that, Einstein seemed to have thrown away the Entwerf theory that wasn't working so well, and the Machian philosophy. And he focused on mathematical beauty, simplicity, and elegance. So I don't know if historians know, so now I'm doing random speculation as a layperson here. But I'm thinking in that conversation that Hilbert and Einstein had during their sleepover, Hilbert said, here's what I think. Einstein's like, okay, very interesting. And then later on, Einstein finds out Hilbert solved it, or almost solved it. So Einstein's thinking, well, what did Hilbert say to me that night? And again, pure speculation. I'm thinking this is why he's like, I'm giving up on Entwerf, I'm giving up on Machian. Now I'm going to think like a mathematician. I'm going to think like Hilbert. And then he worked with a guy called Marcel Grossmann and started developing what would eventually become Einstein's real theory of general relativity, the one that we know today. So Hilbert submitted his paper on general relativity on November 20th. But Einstein didn't know about this because of that delays in sending letters around and things like that. Hilbert submits his paper on general relativity on November 20th. Einstein doesn't know because of the postal office delay things I was mentioning. Hilbert mails in his to the scientific institute. He says, I figured out general relativity. Here it is. He submitted on this date. Einstein doesn't know that Hilbert submitted on this date.
Yep.
November 25th, Einstein submits his paper. Hilbert doesn't know this. December 6th, Hilbert submits an addition or follow-up, I guess I'll say. So the historical consensus is this paper, Hilbert's first paper, was not a complete formulation of general relativity. Therefore, Einstein really did do it first.
Mhm.
But the dates are so close, I feel like Hilbert should get some credit here. Nobody remembers that Hilbert also solved general relativity.
Yeah, it's a very Darwin-Wallace situation.
And Einstein didn't even do it solo. Einstein worked with
Right.
Grossmann to solve it. Because Einstein's thing,
We like the great man theory.
Einstein came up with the Entwerf theory, which was wrong. It's only Einstein plus Grossmann
Right.
that came up with the real general relativity. And not only that, but like then there's this whole extra can of worms, which is, oh, and also Minkowski was involved. This whole extra can of worms, like, well, maybe it wasn't even Einstein. Maybe it was his wife. But even if we put that aside, like he was like, no, women, they can't do science. Even if you accept that,
About it, man.
it still isn't Einstein, right? It's these guys. Einstein got all the credit somehow, even though all of this, you know?
Yes.
So instead of saying like it goes 4 ways or 5 ways, 4 ways being this plus Hilbert plus the wife. So 4 ways or 5 ways, whatever. But no, all the credit went to Einstein.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. That's the one big injustice. But the other thing is Einstein's view of science took a complete 180, right? The general relativity thing here, it made predictions about the gravitational lensing, that light would bend around a star. And so this guy, Arthur Eddington, did a voyage across the sea to find the perfect spot to set up the telescope to see if the gravitational lensing would occur. And it did. And then everyone's like, oh, that means Einstein was right. General relativity is right. Hooray. And there's a famous interview. The reporter asked Einstein, what would you have done if the experiment had gone the other way, if it turned out you were wrong? And the quote from Einstein, he probably answered in German, so this is a translated quote. The quote was, then I would feel sorry for our dear Lord because the theory is correct.
Wait.
Not only is that anti-Machian, my senses, I see that the lensing didn't happen. I'm looking at the light. The lensing didn't happen, but I think general relativity is true anyway. So that's anti-Machian, but it's not merely anti-Machian. It's anti-science. He's saying, if I do an experiment and the experiment disconfirms the theory is still right. Forget the empirical evidence.
Right. Yeah. He made numerous statements to that effect.
I think like years ago, Steph, I asked you in the previous Just Chatting stream, I said, oh, is Einstein actually a scientist? Because some of his views are pretty anti-science. And so we talked about that a bit. But this is like, this throws in this other wrinkle, which is the Machian thing, where he used to be Machian, and then he becomes anti-Machian. So what happened? How does someone change philosophy so hard?
Those guys pendulum swing.
Do we? I thought people generally are relatively consistent in their views.
No, not even remotely. It's quite common for people to swing between really wild extremes. I was just reading about how there's several people who were in the world transgender influencers.
Okay.
Have swung to hardcore Catholicism.
Yeah, now that you bring this up, that does remind me. The most hardcore atheists are ex-religious people, and vice versa. The most more religious people are ex-atheists.
Exactly. And it's not totally unusual for people to switch multiple times between these extremes or to hold this weird hybrid of both extremes.
Although that makes me wonder if it's not so much a fact about like, oh yeah, it's very common for people to switch, than it is a fact about different people are predisposed to different degrees to extremism. And the ones you notice are the ones who swing the most extremely.
Possible. But when they've surveyed people about their views, they're remarkably inconsistent. They may hold views in one domain that you'd think would cross over into others, and they don't.
Yeah, I'm aware of, for example, that psychology experiment where you have a person fill out a survey, like, are you for or against these things? Like political positions. And so they fill out the survey, and then you secretly reverse the answers, and then you ask them, why did you say that you are for abortion?
Why did you say that? Yeah.
Like, even though they said they were against abortion or whatever. And then they'll give a reason. They'll say, oh, I'm for abortion because of this, implying that they really believe that they are for abortion, although 5 minutes ago they had marked that they were against it.
Yeah.
I think that there is a consensus, and I agree with the consensus, which is that a lot of it is signaling. It's like, I want to be part of this group. My group believes abortion is right or wrong or whatever. And since I'm part of that group, then that means I also believe abortion is right or wrong or whatever.
Right. But it's not just group signaling. You're also sort of signaling to yourself. And if you're activating a part of your identity that says, oh, I'm a good person and this is what I think good people believe, but you activate a different part of that where you say, what would a rational person believe? And they say this, okay, you think of yourself as a tough and fair person. And then, right, it's also part of what aspect of their identity gets.
Yeah. Well, identity to me
Yeah.
is also just another part of group. Like I'm part of this group, the rational people group, for example, or the kind people group or whatever. Maybe I'm blurring the idea too much. Who knows?
Yeah.
But so there's that. But I feel like now I'm being folk psychologist. I'm just saying random shit with no studies behind it. I feel like there are some topics where a person feels strongly about, whereas the thing, like the person acts like they feel strongly about, but that's because of group signaling. Like I really want people to think I'm a Democrat, so I'm gonna strongly shout Democrat values, even if I don't really care about them. Like I don't give a shit, honestly. But then there are topics where I do give a shit, and for real I care. And I thought that would be consistent.
Turns out it isn't.
Okay.
Turns out it isn't. Like I think that I care about getting the science right in psychology.
Okay.
If you actually surveyed my actual beliefs, they would turn out to be much more self-serving. And because of that, much more inconsistent and context dependent than I would feel comfortable knowing about myself.
Okay.